Hey everyone! In this video we are going to go through DaVinci Resolve from start to finish, from zero step by step so that everything falls into place in your head. This video works both for people who've never opened DaVinci in their life and for those who've edited something somewhere but never really got the hang of this program. It's a long one, so get comfortable and let's go. Before we start, I need to make a couple of quick asides. The first, why DaVinci at all and not, say, Premiere or something else? The thing is, DaVinci Resolve is a program that packs several programs into one. Originally it was color grading software only, it used to cost absolutely insane money, and it was used in Hollywood, and all anyone did with it was great films. Then Blackmagic Design bought it, and here's why I love this company. They went and dropped the price to the floor. Today there is a completely free version that can do pretty much anything you'll ever need. And there is a studio version. It costs $300, well, $295 to be precise, and you pay for it once and forever. No subscriptions. And if you buy, let's say, a Blackmagic camera, they hand you the studio version for free. Compare that to how it works almost everywhere else these days. You pay every month for the rest of your life, and you'll understand why I respect Blackmagic. Moving on, DaVinci is basically a mashup of several programs in one. You've got editing, you've got graphics and visual effects, you've got color grading with no equal in the industry, you've got full-blown audio work, and of course you've got exporting your finished video. And starting with version 21, they added a separate page for photos, meaning DaVinci can now also process stills at the level of serious photo editors, using the same color tools. We barely touch photography in this course, this is a video course, but know that the page is there now, and I'll talk about it separately in the end. Now, where to get all of this? Head to Google, yeah, this is a very useful tutorial that starts with go to Google, and type in DaVinci Resolve. The very first link takes you to the Blackmagic design site. You hit download and pick a version, free DaVinci Resolve or Studio. You pick your system, macOS, Windows or Linux, you go through a very quick registration where you can type in literally anything and download. There is also a table right here on the page laying out how the free version differs from the paid one. Feel free to scroll through it. And a small quirk. If you already have a studio key, say it came with a camera, you won't find a Download Studio button right here. You have to click Download and in the pop-up menu choose the studio version for your system. It is done a little bit clumsily, but no big deal. And a quick word about language. Even if your native language isn't English, I strongly recommend using English version of DaVinci anyway. There are a couple of reasons for that. First, documentation. If you get serious about this, you'll end up referring to it, and there might not be an officially translated version of the DaVinci manual in your language, and whatever unofficial translation floats around the internet will often only confuse you more. Second, all the good tutorials, all the professionals, the whole market sits on the English version, so if you get used to buttons in another language, you'll be lost poking around in any tutorial. You don't need perfect English here, it's not a novel, it's enough to remember where each button is and what it means. So train yourself on the English interface from the very beginning. I'm showing everything in English. Let's launch DaVinci Resolve. The first thing you see is so-called Project Manager. Yours will be empty, mine has my projects sitting here. This is where all your projects live and where it's convenient to manage them. To create a new one, you hit New Project and the program immediately asks you to come up with a name. You type it in, hit Create and the project opens already named. In newer versions, DaVinci asks for the name right at creation, so you won't have nameless projects and nothing gets lost. You can change how the manager looks. Switch to a list or to large icons. Show extra info like resolution and last open date. You can create folders and sort projects into them. You just drag a project into a folder. On the left, there is a local, network, and cloud area. Local is everything stored on your computer. Network is for collaborative work of a local office network. And cloud is when you store and share projects online, and you can edit alongside someone in another country. And by the way, cloud sync got noticeably faster in the latest versions. And a couple of handy little things. If you right-click a project, there is Open in read-only mode. Open it just for viewing, so you don't accidentally break anything. Handy when you're showing a project to someone. And there is also Load Project Settings, which carries all of the settings from one project over to another, so you do not need to set everything up from scratch each time. And that's basically all you need to know about the project manager to get started. Next, we need to sort out the settings. It is important to get them right at the very beginning, before we start editing, so you do not regret it later. So, settings. DaVinci has lots of them, and they are organized in 3 levels. We'll go through all of them in order now, because you need to understand what lives where before you start working. Open DaVinci Resolve menu, Preferences. There are 2 tabs here. System and User. The difference matters. If you change something in System, you'll most likely have to restart the program for it to take effect. But if you change something in User, you just hit Save and it works right away. These 3 dots reset everything to 0. And a handy thing, user preferences can actually be carried around on a flash drive. You show up at someone else's computer, apply yours, and there is nothing to reconfigure. Let's go through System, top to bottom. The first step is Memory and GPU. The system memory parameter shows how much RAM you have total, and the slider under it limits how much of that Resolve itself can grab. Below that, how much goes to Fusion. I recommend cranking this slider to the max. No matter how much memory you have, complex effects always eat it all anyway. I've got 64 GB, and even so, anything more demanding starts to choke. Below that, the GPU selection. You can leave it on auto and not worry. If you want to do it manually, CUDA is used on NVIDIA cards, OpenCL on AMD, Metal on Apple GPUs. And in GPU selection, if you have several cards and one is more powerful than the other, you pick it manually. If you have one card and DaVinci already figured everything out, leave it as it is. Next, media storage. These are the folders where DaVinci puts its working files, cache, and so on. The main rule, all of this should sit on a fast drive, an SSD. The faster the drive, the nicer the experience. The next step is decode options. The first few hardware decode parameters are worth turning on. That's when video decoding gets handed off to the GPU and everything runs faster. Video and audio I/O is about a capture card. If you do not have one, feel free to skip the tab. Video plugins and audio plugins. This shows your installed plugins. You can enable and disable them. Control panels. If you have a hardware panel for color or audio, you select it here. If not, skip it. General. I'll stop on a couple of things here. There is an automatic update check option. The program will tell you when a new version is out. And there is a beta checkbox. Turn it on and DaVinci will offer you fresh betas. Turn it off and you'll have to check it manually. Internet accounts. You can link YouTube, Vimeo, and so on here. That's for uploading video straight from the deliver page. I don't do that, but you can link accounts here. Advanced is for the truly advanced. Nothing for us to do here. Let's move to the User tab, also top to bottom. First, language. We already talked about it. We keep English. Then there is an option to open the last project automatically on launch. Then the important stop renders when a frame cannot be processed parameter. It's on by default, and I recommend leaving it that way. If during a render DaVinci hits a frame it cannot process, it will stop the render, so you do not end up with an hour-long video that has one black frame somewhere in the middle. While you are here, keep in mind the parameter that stops playback on dropped frames. If you turn it on, you won't really be able to watch anything in the viewer, because frames will keep dropping out. Then the project save and load section, and there is a wonderful thing here called Live Save. Turn it on for sure. That's when DaVinci automatically saves every action you take, and if program crashes or you accidentally quit without saving, it all comes back. Next to it, project backups. Turn those on too, and right there you set how often to save and backup. Then comes the editing section, where the defaults are set. I changed a couple of things here for myself, like the behavior when switching clips and the select parameter, but you'll figure that out later, however suits you. We'll talk about printer lights when we get to color, we'll come back to that. The audio section I don't touch at all, and I advise you not to touch it either. In the playback section, you can simplify a few things to make life easier for a weak computer, but it's not gonna save you. And the metadata section, that's about what data to save in clips. Big companies use this, where everything's organized by metadata. But at the beginner level, you don't really need to go there. Now separately about keyboard shortcuts, and this is important. It's not a tab in the settings, it is a separate window, opened from DaVinci Resolve menu via keyboard customization. Why you need it? In any editing program, everything goes much faster when you know the shortcuts. You press a key, something instantly happens, you don't waste time poking at icons. I've changed a few things here for myself, and I use these keys later in the video, so remember them now. I assigned the C key to cut a clip at the playhead. Q cuts and removes everything before the playhead up to the nearest edit. W removes everything after the playhead. And I also found through search and assigned to a separate key the select all clips forward command. It selects all clips to the right of the playhead. Very handy when you need to insert something and push everything else over. It did clash with another command though, so I had to unbind that one. You can find literally any command through search here and assign it to any key. And one more. In the top right of this window, you can first save your own key preset, and second, pick a ready-made layout. There is DaVinci, Adobe Premiere Pro, and Navid Media Composer. So if you are migrating from another program, your familiar keys stay in place. And the third level of settings, the one you'll turn to most often, is project settings, the gear in the bottom right corner, the settings for the specific project. We start with resolution, timeline, resolution. An important tip here. While you are editing and not yet exporting a final render, do not set the resolution higher than you need. For most tasks, 1920 by 1080 is plenty. Otherwise, you'll be bogging down even a powerful computer for nothing. You can bump the resolution up for the final output later. Next, frame rate, and this one is crucial. You need to set it at the very beginning, because once clips are already added to the project, you won't be able to change it. So decide in advance based on what your footage was shot in. Below that, how the video is displayed. We'll cover the optimized media and render cache section later when we get to playback smoothness. Image scaling will come in handy when we work with different resolutions and formats. Color management, that's a very serious topic. We'll dive into it deliberately on the color page, and for now we'll leave it at sensible defaults. General options I'd advise not touching unless you know what you're doing. The film capture section does not concern us right now. And subtitles and the Fairlight loudness section, those are narrow things for people working professionally to broadcast standards. Nothing for you here yet. Those are the settings you need to understand and adjust before we begin. Next, we finally move on to the pages themselves. At the bottom of the program, we have a row of icons. These are the pages, and this is exactly where we switch between them. Each page handles its own stage of the work, and we'll go through them in order, left to right, the way it's meant to be. Let's start with the first one logically, the media page. The name speaks for itself. Media is the page where you dump all your media files. The thing is, DaVinci has no idea what files you intend to work with. So before doing anything, you need to bring your footage in from your hard drive, so the program understands these are the files we're working with, at this frame rate, in this format. Right away I'll note one peculiarity. Unlike Adobe, you can detach the windows here and drag them wherever you want. Viewer on the right, media pool at the bottom, media storage on the left. You can change their size, but you cannot rearrange them. This is done on purpose. Everyone who opens DaVinci gets the same interface. Now, how to import. Top left, media storage. That's a browser through your drives. You find the folder you need. From there, you can just select files and drag them into the media pool. Or you can right-click, and there are 3 options. Add folder into media pool, dumps all the files into media pool in one heap. Add folder and subfolders, adds the folder and keeps the nested folders inside, preserving the hierarchy. And the third option adds it all as separate bins. And what a bin is, we'll get to in a moment. The big area on the right is taken up by the viewer. There is a handy thing here. If you click the 3 dots and turn on Live Media, then hovering the mouse over a file in the pool brings the picture to life, and you quickly preview what's in each file. Turn it off and nothing happens. At the top of the viewer, zoom, usually set to fit. If the picture suddenly drifts off and you do not understand why, you hit fit and it all comes back. The 3 dots give extra things, for example, showing the file's audio waveform, zoomed or full. Handy when you're hunting for a clap to sync to. At the bottom, the usual player buttons. Play, stop, jump to end, loop. There is a short toggle to view only video, only audio or annotations, and a sound button. There is a jog wheel. If you drag it, the file scrubs smoothly, in tiny steps rather than jumps. And on the right, in and out points. You find the section you need, set an in point with an I key. Then set an out point with an O key. And when you drag that piece into the pool, DaVinci creates a separate subclip from it. That is a trimmed piece of the original. At the bottom, the media pool itself, where all the project files live. You can change the zoom, show it as a list, split it into 2 panels, and open one folder on the left and other on the right. Handy for moving things across. There is a search bar. You can search within a selected bin or across everything at once, by name or by other attributes. You can sort by name, by duration, by FPS, by any parameter. On the right, 3 dots with settings. And this, by the way, is where the latest versions, the smart bins and the power bins moved. They used to be turned on through the view menu. What are these? A regular bin is just a folder inside the pool, while a smart bin is a smart folder that gathers files on its own by a condition, say a keyword in the metadata or in the name. If you like audio and label your footage in advance, say with the word interview, a smart bin will collect all such files by itself. And the power bin is a folder visible across all projects at once. Keep your sounds, logos, intro that you use constantly in there, and they will be at hand in any project. It sounds fiddly, but it's actually simple, and on a big project, it's hard without that kind of organization. On small ones, you do not really need to bother. Right here, we should also get acquainted with the concept of the timeline. The timeline is the editing line and is usually created on the edit page, but you can do it from here as well. Right-click a bin, create new timeline using selected bin. And DaVinci assembles a timeline from all the files in the folder. We do not need this yet, just know that there can be several timelines, and they also live in the media pool. Of the windows that you can call up on this page, top right, the audio button turns on the mixer, where you can see audio peaks and whether the signal exceeds 0. Next to it, the metadata window, where all the data is shown for each file, codec, frame rate, resolution, and so on. You can also fill in metadata manually, but again, that's only needed on big projects. We'll skip the inspector and capture here for now. The inspector will cover in detail on edit, and a capture card we simply don't have. Now a few things worth knowing about this page that, by the way, work everywhere in DaVinci. The media pool is available from any page. It's always in the top left corner. Undo is Ctrl-Z, redo is Ctrl-Shift-Z, and there is also a history in the edit menu, a history of all your actions, which lets you jump straight to the step you need instead of hitting Ctrl-Z 10 times. Next, the clone tool, that icon to the right of the media pool, a not so obvious thing but a useful one. You point to a source folder with a right click and set as clone source. then the destination folder. Optionally choose a checksum verification type, and DaVinci copies the footage with an integrity check. What for? This is the right way to offload shot footage from a memory card onto a drive, with a guarantee that nothing got corrupted in copying. And by the way, here's a crucial rule. Never edit straight off the card. First offload the footage onto your working drive and then work from there. Another of the most needed functions of this page is auto-syncing audio with video. If you recorded sound on a separate microphone, you select the video and audio file, right-click Auto-Sync Audio. DaVinci analyzes the sound itself and lines them up by the waveform. There are two options. Either it keeps the original track and hangs the second one below it, or it replaces the audio with the new one. You can also set it loose on a whole bin at once. It will find the video and audio parts automatically and sync them. If you drop photos in here with similar names and sequential numbers, image 1, image 2, image 3, DaVinci might decide it's a sequence and glue them into a single animation, which is maddening when you don't want it. You turn this off in those same three dots via Frame Display Mode. There you switch between putting them into a sequence or keeping them as separate images. Separately, about missing files. If you move to rename the originals, the clips will turn red, crossed out, media offline. Nothing to panic about. The edit isn't lost. DaVinci just cannot find the files. Note a recent change. There used to be separate relink items for a clip and change source media on the right click. Now they've been removed from the menu. You can relink in two ways. The first, a separate relink button. The broken chain icon at the top left above the media pool. You hit it, point to the new location, and DaVinci finds the files. The second, right-click on the media pool where there's only one relink item. Relink clips for bin. It relinks the whole bin at once. You pick it, point to the folder, and from there DaVinci finds all the files and relinks them automatically. And one more parameter worth knowing about, especially with audio: clip attributes. Right-click a file, clip attributes. A lot of microphones record in mono, and in older versions of DaVinci this was a pain. A mono clip on a stereo track would only play in one ear, and you had to come in here and manually change the format to stereo, duplicating the channel. Good news! In version 21 this is finally fixed. A mono clip dropped onto a stereo track now plays in both channels on its own. Nothing to configure. But clip attributes is still worth remembering. If a mic recorded several channels for you and the right one isn't the active one, or the channels need swapping, this is exactly where you sort that out. So if the audio behaves strangely, this is the first place to look. Among the smart functions, search through a mountain of footage. In version 21 they added IntelliSearch. It searches by the content of clips using plain words. You type person by a window, or find people by their faces, and DaVinci serves up the matching clips even if you never labeled them at all. But for this to work, the footage first has to be run through analysis, and you can launch it two ways. Either you select the files you need and run analysis on them, or you hit the separate AI analysis button on the left. It opens a little window where you check off exactly what to analyze: image search, faces, speech recognition, and so on. And runs it all at once across everything in the project, not just the selection. Essentially the same as select all, but with one button for the whole project. Face recognition used to be a separate function that would sort each person into their own folders. Now that separate sorting is gone. It's become part of IntelliSearch. But I'm gonna warn you right away. In the current version this basically does not work. The moment you launch file analysis, DaVinci crashes. So the feature cannot be used for now. Also in version 21 they added native support for photo camera RAW formats. Canon CR3, Fujifilm RAW, Nikon NEF, Sony ARW, and Apple ProRAW. This is primarily for the new photo page, but either way, the odds that your footage just opens without a headache went up. And now the thing I promised back in settings about optimized media and render cache. It is a problem anyone knows. A heavy codec or 4K on a weak machine and the timeline stutters, playback jerks, you cannot work. DaVinci solved this in two ways. First, optimized media. You select the heavy clips in the media pool, right-click, generate optimized media, and the program creates lightweight copies in an edit-friendly codec. Then you edit off them smoothly, and on the final render, DaVinci grabs the originals in full quality on its own. Second, render cache. Here the program pre-computes the heavy spots in the background, effects, transitions, fusion compositions, and feeds you the already rendered frames so they aren't recalculated on the fly. It is turned on in the playback menu. A smart mode does it automatically wherever it sees a load. Where all this physically lives you already set in the preferences in media storage. I said it should be a fast SSD, and now it's clear why. Both the optimized media and the cache get written right there, and how smoothly you work depends directly on the drive's speed. As you can see, the media page actually has far more functions than it seems at first glance. We've gone over the essentials, which is enough for a beginner level. Let's move on. The next page is cut. And right away a question, what the hell is this? Since other programs have nothing like this. They just have a single editing page. Cut positions itself as a fast rough editing. Chop up files, throw in basic transitions, drop in some music, get a rough sense of what your video is gonna be. And then move to edit and polish everything there. I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't use the cut page at all. But I've read the manual, tried everything it describes, so I'll give you a surface level beginner overview of what happens here. And then you decide for yourself whether you need this page or whether you'll, like many other people, ignore it completely and do everything on edit. You can import footage here the same way. Right-click the media pool or the import media button up top. There is also import media folder if you want to add a whole folder. Footage usually comes in on the media page, but you can do it from here if you like. The viewer on cut is interesting. Top left has 3 icons. The first, source clip, you just look at the original file. The second, source tape, and this is a new concept. Here all your files are glued into one tape, as if it is a single long reel of film, and you can quickly scroll through absolutely all your footage at once. And the third, timeline, shows what's already on the editing table. Next to it there is a Save Area button with boundary frames. You can turn on, for example, a 4x5 vertical layout for social media to see the edges. There is a button that turns off color and graphics during playback to make it playback easier. And there is a fast review button. In source tape mode, it runs through all your footage quickly, with long clips going faster and short ones slower, which is handy for reviewing what you've shot. And the Tools button opens basic tools under the viewer: transform, crop, dynamic zoom, composite mode, clip speed, stabilization, audio. But honestly, I do all of that on edit and color, definitely not here. The most unusual thing on cut is the 2 timelines at once. The top one is zoomed out, where you see the whole video, and the bottom one is zoomed in, where you see what you're actually doing. And here is what's hard to get used to. At the bottom, by default, the playhead stays put and the timeline itself moves under it. If you do not like that, the behavior can be switched. You click the timeline options icon above the timeline and uncheck fixed playhead, and then the bottom timeline behaves like a normal one. The clips stay put and the playhead moves across them. The developers say the fixed playhead is convenient with their own editing keyboard, where everything spins on a wheel, and the free one is for when you're trimming precisely with a mouse. So it's a matter of taste, try both and pick your own. By the way, the same timeline options menu hides a few more useful toggles. Ripple on is the behavior of the main track. By default, when you trim a clip, everything else shifts along with it, and track behaves like a tape. Everything butts together and no gap is left. But ripple can be turned off, and then trims stop shifting the edit, and here comes a nuance. A gap on the main track is now possible, so watch for that. And if you hold Alt while trimming, ripple turns off temporarily, just for that operation. On the upper track, gaps live freely in any mode. Next, trim to audio. When you trim a clip, its waveform temporarily enlarges, and you can see where a word ends or a beat begins. A big help for cutting speech in music precisely. Snapping lives there too, the N key. When it is on, clips magnetize to each other and to the playhead, and you turn it off when you need to nudge something more precisely. And while we are at tracks, you add a new one with right-click, Add Track. Each one can be locked so you don't accidentally shift, say music you've already laid out. A locked track just goes gray. Any clips on it don't move. The tracks also have mute and a video toggle to temporarily remove, say, titles and see what's underneath. Clips are added on cut with a set of buttons, each with its own logic. Smart Insert inserts a clip between two others, where the playhead is. Append simply adds to the end, that's the most common. Overwrite lays over, painting over what's under the playhead. Close-up, a neat little thing that zooms in about 150% and finds a face to automatically make a close-up cutaway. Place on top puts the clip on the track above. And Source. This button is for replacing by timecode, which we don't use here, so on its own it won't do anything. It works for multicam shooting when you've presynced your angles with the Sync Clip button. Then you can swap one angle for another. There is a toggle to drop in only video or only audio, and 3 transition buttons nearby: a plain cut, a cross dissolve, and a smooth cut. But honestly, all of this can be done by simply dragging with the mouse. You do not need to memorize the buttons. I'm gonna say a little bit more about transitions, because here they are genuinely made to be fast. You put the playhead near a cut, hit the dissolve button, and a 1-second cross dissolve drops onto the nearest cut. The cut button conversely removes the transition and restores a plain cut. You can also just select a transition and hit delete. And smooth cut is a separate kind of magic, a special neural network transition that morphs the picture and stitches jump cuts in interview so the joints are almost invisible. It works though only if the person didn't shift much between takes. Beside these 3 buttons, top left, there are panels. Transitions, titles and effects, from which any transitions, titles and effects are simply dragged into the timeline and adjusted afterwards in the inspector. But we're gonna cover all of this on the edit page. The toolset there is the same. Since Cut is designed for multicam, it has its own trump card, Sync Bin. It is a button up top. If you've presynced your angles, the viewer turns into multi-view, showing all cameras at once, always in sync with the playhead. And here is the interesting part: live overwrite. You click the angle you want right in the viewer and drag horizontally, and that angle gets painted onto the timeline for exactly the length of your drag. Click another camera, drag the next piece. With simple mouse strokes like that, you can edit a whole multicam show. Blackmagic sells a separate speed editor keyboard for this, but it works with mouse too. One more interesting thing here, the voiceover tool. In the viewer there is a voiceover icon. You connect a mic, choose a track, by default a separate one is created called VO. Set the playhead or an in point to record from and hit record. The interface turns red, meaning you're alive. You can load a plain text file with your script and it's gonna scroll across the screen like a teleprompter. And what's important, you can turn on voice isolation and dialogue leveler right on the fly, and then even a recording on your laptop's built-in mic in a noisy room will sound decent. The first cleans out background noise with a neural net, the second evens out the loudness of the speech. After you stop, the playhead jumps back to the start on its own. You'll listen to the take right away, and if you do not like it, you record the next one. These same audio helpers are available for plain clips on the timeline too, through the Tools and the Audio tab in the inspector. Voice isolation removes noise from already recorded audio. Dialogue leveler evens out dialogue without pumping like a compressor. And at the track level, there is a ducker, automatic ducking. You tell it that the music track should dip when speech plays, and the mix mixes itself from there. In the studio version, there is a whole pack of tools living there too, like Music Remixer, which breaks a finished track down into vocals and instruments, but that's already beyond a beginner level. A word about vertical versions of your videos, since Cut is aimed at social media. For that, there is a Smart Reframe, a studio version feature. If you shot horizontal 16:9, but need vertical 9:16, the neural net finds the main subject in the frame and keeps it in the frame when reframing. But it is important to understand the button alone is not gonna do anything. It has a mandatory sequence. First, the timeline has to become vertical, otherwise there is nothing to reframe. You duplicate the timeline so you do not lose the horizontal version. Then right-click it, Timelines, Timeline Settings, turn on Use Vertical Resolution. And right here, be sure to check the Mismatched Resolution Files parameter. It needs to be set to Scale Full Frame with Crop. In other modes, you won't see the effect. Now you open the vertical timeline, select the clips, all of them at once is fine, go to the inspector to the Smart Reframe section and hit the Reframe button. The neural engine will start analyzing. It takes time, so don't be alarmed by the pause. On long footage, it is noticeable. After the analysis, each shot shifts on its own, so the main subject stays in the frame. And if the automation missed on some clip, you switch object of interest from auto to reference point. Move the focus window onto the subject and hit reframe again. Now DaVinci will track exactly that. In the studio version, transcription is also available on Cut. DaVinci recognizes speech across all clips, and then you can search your footage by the spoken words and edit right of the track. You highlight a sentence in the transcript and it flies onto the timeline. For interviews and documentaries, this saves hours. We'll talk more about text-based editing on Edit. The workflow is the same. There is a detector that's literally called the boring detector. It is hidden in the same timeline options menu, the very bottom item. Here is how it works. You turn it on and marks appear on the timeline. With the red stripe, the detector flags jump cuts, very short clips a couple of frames long. And shots that are too long, it shades gray, meaning the viewer will get bored here. The thresholds are adjustable. You set how many frames count as a jump cut and how many seconds count as boredom. So it calibrates differently for a fast-paced video versus an interview. And in the course of fast editing, it really does catch both accidental slivers and dragged-out chunks. There are three little working things left to name. Markers, the M key. Drop a colored bookmark, double-click to label it, and jump between markers. A clip can be disabled with the D key. It goes dark entirely, along with its sound. And if you need to remove only the audio while keeping the picture, that's what mute is for. And you can assign a color to any clip with a right-click that carries across all pages. Colorists and editors use it to mark what's already been handled and what's not. A separate bit of exotica. Replay mode. The cut page can work as a replay controller for live broadcasts, with slow-motion replays, stingers, and titles, like on sports TV. In version 21, they refined it further. There is a button that opens only the last 5 minutes of a growing live file. You can set different stingers for the in and out of a replay and keep a palette of 6 favorite titles at hand. For normal editing, you do not need any of this, but now you know it exists. Some capabilities only really unlock with Blackmagic hardware. And the final touch, very much in the spirit of this page, Quick Export. The Quick Export button sits right in the top right corner. You hit it, pick a preset, H.264, ProRes, or upload straight to YouTube, Vimeo, Dropbox, and the video goes to render without a trip to the deliver page. If you set an in and out point on the timeline, only the selected piece is exported. For drafts and quick social clips, perfect. In short, the cut page is high-speed rough editing, and Blackmagic even sells a dedicated editing keyboard for it. I do not need it, but anyone who wanted one now knows about it. Let's move on to the main event, the edit page. The edit page is the biggest and the most important. Editors spend 100% of their time here, and you'll spend a lot here too. It's a big section, so take it easy, step by step. One caveat up front, in places we'll jump back and forth between the timeline and the inspector. Not because this is my way of having fun, but because that's exactly the order the material is laid out in Blackmagic's manual, and I'm following its logic. Let's start with the interface. You can bring footage in here the same way as on the other pages, right-click in the media pool. There is a nuance here. If you import a file whose frame rate differs from the project's, DaVinci will ask whether to change the project's frame rate to match it. Remember, we set the frame rate in advance, so if your main footage is at the right frame rate and this file is the exception, you hit Do Not Change and change nothing. Top left, the same media pool. In the center, 2 viewers. The left one, Source, shows the original clip from the pool. The right one, Timeline, shows what's assembled on the editing table. And you can work like this. Open a clip in Source, set an in point with an I, an out point with an O key, and drop that piece into the timeline. You can drop it by simply dragging, or you can drag the picture from source straight into the timeline window. Then a little menu pops up with the ways to insert it. Overwrite, insert, replace, place on top, fit to fill. The two viewers can also be linked so they scroll in sync, sometimes needed for multicam. And above the viewer on the right there is a button that turns off color and graphics during playback to make it play easier. Right-click it and you can turn off color and fusion separately. And one more thing about the timeline viewer worth knowing right away. In the bottom left there is a drop-down of on-screen tools: transform, crop, dynamic zoom, annotations, and others. You pick a mode and control it right in the frame. Move and scale the picture with the mouse, crop the edges, and in annotation mode you can draw arrows and notes over the frame for yourself and for colleagues. Top right, the inspector, and this is probably the single most important thing on this page. The inspector shows the parameters of the selected clip and lets you change them. Select the clip, open the inspector. The most needed thing here is the transform section. Zoom scales, position moves the picture, rotation rotates. There is also tilt. Each parameter has a reset on the right. Double-click the name to return the value to 0. Between paired parameters like width and height scale there is a chain icon. While it's linked, they change in sync. Unlink it and you can drag them separately and stretch the picture. And at the very end of each row there is a diamond. That's an animation keyframe. Here is how it works. You set the playhead, hit the diamond, you've placed the first keyframe. Move the playhead further, change the parameter. A second keyframe is placed automatically, and DaVinci smoothly runs the value between them. There is your slow push in. A keyframe can be deleted by parking on it and hitting the diamond again. You can animate literally any parameter this way. And when you have more than 2 keyframes, the diamonds in the inspector aren't enough. Open the keyframes panel, the button in the toolbar at the top of the page. It's a full-blown separate keyframe editor. It has 2 views: tracks, where all the keyframes of the selected clips lie along time and drag with the mouse, and curves, splines, where you see how a parameter changes over time. Points are selected in batches and Bezier handles bend the trajectory. This is exactly where animation turns from a couple of diamonds into meaningful movement. And I'll come back to this editor later in the section. Lowering the inspector, cropping, trimming the edges, dynamic zoom, a ready-made smooth push, composite mode, blend mode, speed, stabilization, and smart reframe. The same one we covered in detail on the cut page. Here it works exactly the same, through a vertical timeline at the reframe button. Switch to the audio tab and you get the same diamonds and parameters, but for audio now, plus audio effects. The inspector is what you'll be working with constantly, so dig into it. Experiment, your hands will remember it fast. Now the timeline, the whole bottom area. The easiest way to create one is by dragging a file down. DaVinci makes a timeline itself. There is also a way with no mouse at all. Ctrl+2 gets you into the bin. You pick a file with the arrows, scrub it with J, K, L keys. Set I and O and drop the pieces into the timeline with a shortcut. The shortcuts are right now on your screen. After you create a timeline, a red dash appears on that file in the media pool, and it is exactly the piece of the file that's on the edit that's underlined, not the whole file. From the length and position of the dash, you can immediately see what part of the original has been used. Note, your timeline will start by default not at 0 but at 1 hour. That's completely normal, it's a DaVinci convention from TV days. It has no effect on editing. It visually annoys me, so I changed mine to 0. And you can too. Right-click the timeline in the media pool. Timelines, starting timecode. Type in 0, done. You can even select several timelines and change them all at once. And if you create a timeline through Create New Timeline, the Start Timecode field is right there in that window. But the easiest thing is not to stress about it at all and set it once in the Preferences. Preferences User Editing. There is a starting timecode for new timelines. Put in zeros, and every new timeline will start at 0. So don't be surprised that I have zeros on screen and you have an hour. Now you know where the difference comes from and how to remove it. Tracks come as video and audio. Video stacks on top of each other, and the top one always covers the bottom. Remember this layer logic. Titles and cutaways go on the track above. You're gonna need to change the timeline zoom constantly. The handiest way is to hold Alt and spin the mouse wheel to zoom. Control and the wheel to move left and right. There are also full, detail, and custom zoom buttons, and you'll use them fairly often. The first button on the left and the toolbar above the timeline is Timeline View Options. Here you choose the track view, I prefer film strip, where frames are spread along the clip. That's also where you turn on a separate subtitle track and adjust track height. You can add timeline tabs and even stack two timelines above each other. Handy, for example, to keep the main roll on top and cutaways below. When you move the playhead quickly, you hear snippets of sound. That's audio scrubbing, turned off with Shift-S. You can bring up the scopes here to understand what's happening with the image, Control-Shift-W, but you really only need them on color. Next, things on the panel above the timeline and around it. Markers, the M key, a colored bookmark familiar from the cut page. If you hold Alt and drag a marker, it stretches out, marking the start and end of a section. And in 3 dots there is a list of all markers you can conveniently jump through. Snapping, the N key, also familiar from cut. Clips magnetize to cuts and to the playhead, and you turn it off when you need to nudge something precisely, rather than butting it against the clip. Link selection. That chain that automatically selects a clip's audio when you select its video. Instead of toggling it, it's easier to hold Alt and click to select only the video or only the audio. If you need to fully unlink video and audio or conversely link foreign clips together, right-click Link Clips. There is position lock, so nothing moves at all, and a lock on an individual track. Lock track so you do not touch it. Nearby, disable a track, solo, and mute for audio. There are also track selectors on the left. If you deselect a track, a cut or a delete won't touch it. For example, you cut with a C key and the top track doesn't get cut. And at the very end of an edit, you can turn on highlighting and duplicate frames. Menu View show duplicate frames. And on clips whose frames are used more than once in the video, colored stripes appear on top, so you don't accidentally leave a duplicate piece. Now the editing tools. By default, selection mode is chosen, the normal arrow, to select and move. I basically never change it. There is trim edit mode, where you can slip the content inside a clip without moving the clip on the timeline, for when you've cut everything to music but want to show a different part of the same footage. There is a dynamic mode, where you drive the clip with J, K, L keys. I find it awkward and I don't use it. And there is blade, but instead of it, I hit my own C key. It cuts at the playhead. Select the clip and only it gets cut. And with the Q and W keys, I remove everything before and after the playhead. I strongly recommend editing with shortcuts. Dragging with the mouse, you'll spend twice as long. About trimming. You hover over a cut and there are 2 different moves depending on what you grab. If you grab the cut itself in the center, you move the junction point of the 2 clips. One lengthens, the other shortens by exactly the same amount, and the overall length of the edit doesn't change. The joint just slides. But if you grab the edge of a specific clip, you lengthen or shorten that one. The clip rides over its neighbor or pulls away from it, within its own original. DaVinci respects the boundaries of the material and hits a wall there. You cannot stretch beyond what was shot. When you drag a clip onto another spot, by default it paints over the neighbor. To avoid that, hold Ctrl-Shift, then it won't erase, but push aside. The empty spaces between clips are called gaps. You select and remove them with Delete or Backspace. There is also a command to remove them all at once. The Edit menu, Delete Gaps. But be careful with it. Sometimes the edit can easily shift to somewhere you didn't expect. I prefer to clean gaps manually. If you see a little red square with the plus-minus frames, that's an offset. The audio is shifted relative to the video. On the right click, there are 4 ways to align it. Slip in place, move in place, and their audio versions. You choose what you want, video or audio. To copy a clip, Ctrl-C or Alt with the drag. Separately, I'm gonna mention compound clips and render in place because it's a lifesaver. Sometimes even on a powerful machine rendering in 4K, DaVinci hits a heavy spot, lots of layers, effects, and aborts the render. You select that piece, right-click to create a new compound clip. A dozen clips collapse into a tidy one. You go inside with a right-click, open in timeline. The timeline shows the compound's contents, and you can edit everything there. And to get back out, double-click the parent timeline's name in the path bar, in the bottom left of the timeline. Remember this, or your first trip inside a compound will end in panic. Where's my edit? Then right-click Render in Place. Pick a format, and DaVinci computes only that piece and substitutes a finished file. It renders at the timeline resolution, and if you check Render at source resolution, at the original's resolution, so you lose nothing in quality. And it is completely reversible. The decompose to original command puts the live clips back with all their effects. But the whole project will render. It saved me many times. Now transitions. Open Effects, Video Transitions. Run the mouse over them. The viewer shows how it will look. The most common, cross dissolve. You drag it into the cut between the clips. And there is a nuance. If a clip is sitting at its very beginning or very end, the transition won't go on. It needs so-called handles, at least 6 frames of spare on each side to overlap with. The easiest way, right-click the cut, and there are ready-made commands like Add 6 frame cross dissolve for 6, 12, 25, and 50 frames. The numbers adjust to the project's frame rate. I'm at 25 FPS, so 25 and 50 are exactly 1 second and 2. You hit it, DaVinci trims the clips and places the transition in one action. You then drag the transition's length by its edges, or set it precisely in the inspector, in seconds and frames. And there is a Set as Default Duration button to make the new length the standard. The alignment parameter decides where the transition sits relative to the cut, before, centered, or after. And the smoothness is controlled by the ease parameter. The presets in, and out give a soft entry or exit, and the custom option hands it all to you. With the transition curve slider right below it, you set the character of the transition yourself, sharper at the start or softer towards the end, to make the dissolve livelier. Note, when you add a transition via right-click with video and audio selected, it goes on to audio too, and an audio transition isn't always what you want. Now, a fast way. You hit V, the cut nearest the playhead gets selected. Do not confuse it with B. B by default turns on the blade. Then Ctrl T. The default transition is placed. The default transition is marked with a red stripe. Any one you like can be made the default with the right click or the Set as Default Transition button in the inspector. And you can add it to favorites with a star. Titles. Effects, titles. You drop onto a track above the video a plain text or a text plus, which gives more control, and set everything up in the inspector. The text itself, font, size, color, tracking. And over the last few versions, text got seriously upgraded. A proper font browser with live preview, spell check right in the field, emoji and color font support. Plus, you can now drag in animated graphics in Lottie and OGIRAF formats. You drop .json and .lottie files right into the media pool, and they behave like ready-made animations with transparency, handy for lower thirds and titles. And there is a pile of Ready Fusion titles in the library. You take one, change the text, and you've got a professional title. They used to hammer even powerful machines, now Blackmagic has optimized them. No problem. Effects. There are simple ones, and the interesting stuff is in the open effects. Blurs, glows, stylization, grain. Most effects I apply on color. Complex ones on Fusion. But if an effect is simple and needed on the fly during editing, you take it right here, drag it onto a clip, and tweak the parameters in the inspector, and those can be animated with diamonds too. A very useful trick, instead of a clip, apply an effect to an empty adjustment clip on the top track. Everything below it gets that effect. It is easy to copy to another spot, and a smooth fade in and out is done right on the adjustment clip itself by hand. No fiddling with keyframes. To copy parameters from clip to clip, Ctrl-C on the source, park on another, Alt-V. A little window opens where you choose exactly what to carry over. To remove those attributes later, right-click, remove attributes. A couple of words about audio on Edit too, so you don't run to Fairlight for little things. Volume drags right on the clip by the white line in the middle. Hold Shift and it drags gently. A precise value is easier to type in the inspector. Very often, you'll place keyframes on this line to write the volume up and down, under music, under dialogue. And for a smooth fade in and out, there is a simpler way than keyframes. In the top corners of the clip, both audio and video, there are little handles. You drag them toward the center and get a fade. On audio, a volume fade, on video from or to black. A track can be normalized to a required standard with a right-click, and the track type mono, stereo, 5.1, 7.1 is changed through Change Track Type. And speed retiming. Change speed clip opens a window where you set a percentage. Speeding up no problem, even by 1000%. But slowing down requires the clip to be shot with a frame surplus at 60 or 120 fps. Otherwise you'll get doubled frozen frames. You can also play it in reverse here. A freeze frame is done with Shift R. The frame under the playhead freezes. And for speed ramps, where the video smoothly accelerates and slows, there is retime controls, Control R. A speed track appears on the clip. You place points and set the acceleration between them. But the speed curve right on the clip, the way it used to be, is gone. In version 21, all of this moved into the keyframes panel that we covered by the inspector. You open it and the speed keyframes are edited there like ordinary ones. You pull the Bezier handles at the points into an arc, so the ramp is smooth rather than abrupt. In the studio version, there is also smart slow motion that draws in intermediate frames. The slow-mo comes out smooth. And since we've finished in the keyframe editor, without leaving it, I'll go through what's appeared in the recent versions and logically belongs right here on the edit. Keyframes got the most attention. They now have full Bezier curves with smooth easing. Step in and step out keyframes. The value doesn't glide, it jumps like a second hand on a clock. Looping and ping-pong. You select several keyframes. Pick loop type in the editor menu and the movement repeats on its own to the end of the clip or goes back and forth. The classic bouncing ball animation. A shape box you can lasso a group of keyframes with and stretch or squeeze them all at once. This works on several selected clips at once. Their curves show side by side, easy to compare. And you can keyframe right from the edit page, not only clips, but text, generators and fusion compositions. The voiceover palette. To record voiceover right in the timeline, you connect a mic, set the playhead, a countdown runs and the voice records onto a track. We already covered this tool on the cut page. Here it's the same, down to the teleprompter and on-the-fly processing, so if you recorded voice there, it'll be familiar here. Automatic subtitles appeared. DaVinci uses AI to recognize the speech in your video and lay ready subtitles along the timeline. Plus, there is a library of animated templates, including ones where words light up one by one in time with the speech. The recognition isn't perfect, you'll have to proofread terms and names, but it's many times faster than typing by hand. There is also IntelliScript. Remember, on cut I promised to come back to text-based editing. Here it is. The idea is lovely. You select clips in the media pool, right-click, AI tools, create new timeline using IntelliScript. Feed it a text file with the script. And DaVinci of the recognized speech assembles a rough timeline itself. The best takes on the first track, alternates on the track above, disabled. But I'm gonna be honest, this feature acted up for me. On my file, even perfectly plain text without a single special character, it answers with an invalid script file error. I tried different encodings and simplifying the text to the limit. No luck. So if you get the same, you are not alone. It's from the same batch of raw AI features in this fresh release as the crashing analysis in IntelliSearch. We are waiting for patches. And multicam editing. On cut there was sync bin with painting angles by mouse, and edit has its own approach. You gather angles into a multicam clip, switch between with clicks right during playback. And Multicam Smart Switch uses AI to switch to whoever's speaking on its own. Just note, almost all of this AI stuff, auto subtitles, IntelliScript, Smart Switch, are studio version features. There is a lot more to say about edit, but for a beginner level, this is enough to build a video from start to finish. Let's move to the Fusion page. We've reached the great and terrible Fusion page. I'm gonna be honest right away, this is the hardest page to grasp in DaVinci, and within a beginner course we'll only skim the surface here, so you understand what it is, what it's for, and how to even breathe in here. However, much I've poked around here myself, I still cannot work 100% intuitively, without thinking. That takes a lot of experience, so don't worry if it doesn't click right away. That's completely normal. Fusion is the page for creating visual effects and complex graphics. There is a separate program called Fusion Studio, by the way, which runs more stably and faster than the built-in one, but we are of course covering the Fusion that's inside DaVinci. And the first thing to get into your head, if on edit everything is done in layers, clip of a clip, here everything is done through nodes. A node is a knot, a little block that does one thing to the picture, or is picture itself, like media in. You connect these blocks with lines into a chain, and the picture flows through it left to right, from one node to the next, gradually transforming. Your brain resists at first, but you get used to it. When you enter Fusion from a normal clip, you see two nodes. Media in, that's your picture coming from the timeline, the input, and media out, the output, what goes back to the timeline. Everything you want to do gets inserted between them. Up top to viewers, at the bottom the node graph, where you do your magic. On the right the inspector with the parameters of the selected node. You move around the graph like this. Holding the middle mouse button tracks the canvas. The wheel scrolls up and down, and zoom in, Ctrl plus wheel. To send a node to the viewer, you select it with the left button and press 1 for the left viewer or 2 for the right. Or you can just drag the node into the viewer with the mouse. Beginners often don't understand why they see nothing, and it's all because no node is sent to the viewer. You add a new node with Shift space. A search opens. You type a name. There are hundreds of nodes, impossible to keep in your head, so everyone uses search. Nodes connect like this. You hold the output of one node and drag a line straight to the input you want onto the second. Release and the connection is made. And to insert a new node into the middle of an already built chain, there are two handy ways. First, you select the node you want to insert after and add the next one. It connects to the selected one on its own. Second, if you drag a node onto the existing line, do it holding Shift. Then it inserts into the break instead of just lying on top. And a small but important detail, nodes have inputs of different colors, and that's not random. The yellow input is the main picture. The blue one is usually a mask. The green one is extra data, like a second image. Once you learn to read these colors, any node graph, even someone else's, stops being scary. Let's go through a simple example. Say we want to make a title on the background. For this, it's convenient to take not a ready clip but an empty composition. On edit in the effects, there is a Fusion composition. You drop it onto the timeline and go in. First we add a background node. That's a color fill. Then a text plus node. Now they need to be glued together, and here's the keyword appears. Merge. It's a node that combines two pictures into one. One as a background, the other on top. You do not even need to search for it separately. Just drag the text output onto the background's output. Fusion understands you want to combine two pictures and creates a merge between them automatically. Merge has two inputs. Background, the back layer, and foreground, what lays on top. What ends up on top depends on which input gets what. And if you mix it up, no problem. Select the merge, hit Ctrl-T, and the inputs swap. The same is on the right click, swap inputs. The wires do not even move, the inputs just change colors. We need the text on top of the background, so background into background, text into foreground. Connect the merge to media out, and the title is ready, off to the timeline. This principle, add a node, connect, look, is how absolutely everything in Fusion is built. The chains can just be longer and more complex. Next, what a beginner actually comes here for, masks and the tracker. A mask is a contour with which you cut out parts of the picture. The polygon node lets you draw around an object by hand, and the tracker follows the movement of an object in the frame. And we're gonna start with the simplest thing you'll definitely repeat, with an effect that was wildly popular at one point. It is called locked on, when the whole image seems glued to a person's hat. The hat stands dead still in the center of the frame, and the whole world around it shakes about. It looks striking, it's surprisingly easy, literally a few steps. We add a tracker node right between media in and media out, in line. We select it A track point appears in the viewer. We drag it onto the head, onto a distinct detail, the face or an eye. By the way, IntelliTrack already works here by default. It is a smart tracker that latches onto an object with a neural net and holds it far more firmly than an ordinary point. We hit track forward and backward. The tracker runs the clip and memorizes how the head moves. Now in the inspector we go to the operation tab and we change just two things. We set operation to match move mode and switch the merge parameter next to it to background only. And that's it. The tracker reverses the movement and shifts the whole frame so the head stays in place. The head stands rock still in the center and the world around it dances. Nothing to link by hand. The tracker does it for you. One touch remains. Since the image now moves, black emptiness pokes out at the edges of the frame. So, back to edit, just zoom this clip up a little via zoom in the inspector so the edges go off the frame. This is the level you should start from. And then I'm gonna show where this scales to, briefly now as a demonstration of what's possible without a step-by-step recipe. A classic task. Blur out a license plate on a passing car. Here a combination of mask, blur and tracking comes into play. We blur the plate along a contour with a mask, track the car and make the blur ride along with it. It's a multi-node setup with a planar tracker and a couple of tricks. And building it from scratch is a bit early for a beginner, but you'll see the result and know it's possible. And exactly how is a topic for a separate, more detailed video. By the same logic, films blur out faces, logos, plates, put graphics on moving objects. And in Fusion everything animates the same as on Edit, with keyframes. You set a key at the start, a key at the end. The parameter changes smoothly. That's how, for example, a title slides in. And while we are here, Fusion specifically got a noticeable upgrade in the recent versions. They added a big set of Crocodile tools, dozens of new graphics generators and effects, over 100 new motion graphics tools in total. There is an updated macro editor that lets you assemble your own tool node from a finished chain and publish it right onto the edit page to use as a regular effect. Plus that Lottie and OG Rough support I mentioned back on the edit. And last, so you don't get lost, you go back to editing with those same page buttons at the bottom. You hit edit and that's it. The composition you build here doesn't go anywhere, it stays living right on that clip, like an effect. If you want to tweak it, you go into Fusion again from the same clip. Fusion can be studied endlessly, there is no end to it, and beyond this it's self-directed learning. Your task at the start is simple: understand the logic of nodes, not be afraid of this page, and be able to build a simple thing: a title in the background, a mask, and a tracker. Let's move on to my favorite page. The color page is my favorite in DaVinci. Why my favorite? Well, first, I'm always grading all kinds of stuff here. And second, and this is important to understand, DaVinci was originally born specifically as color grading software. Everything else, editing, graphics, audio, was added later. So color is the program's native heart, and here it has no equal. That is a big section because it is a big topic, but let's go. First, why bother at all? The picture straight from the camera is almost always flat, especially if you shoot in flat profiles. And working with color splits into two parts. First, correction. Bringing the picture to a normal state, proper brightness, contrast, white balance, and matching shots to each other. Second, grading. Setting a mood, a warm golden atmosphere or a cold, grim thriller. Always correction first, then the grade. But before touching a single wheel, the most important step that beginners skip and then suffer for, you need to understand what your footage was shot in. There are two different cases. If the camera recorded straight into Rec 709, that's the standard television space, a familiar contrasty picture, then you can grade right away. But if you shot in log, S-Log on Sony, C-Log on Canon, V-Log on Panasonic, then the footage looks flat, gray, washed out. And here is what matters. You cannot grade in log. It's not a finished picture, but a container into which the camera stuffed maximum information in the shadow and highlights, so you could decide yourself how to reveal it. If you start spinning wheels right on the log, you'll be fighting an inherently broken contrast and get mush. First, the log has to be interpreted, converted into a normal space. There are several ways to do that. The simplest, put a conversion LUT from the camera manufacturer on the clip. It's a ready-made translator file. Canon has its own, Sony has its own. You place it on a separate node, and the log turns into a normal picture in one move. The second way, also quite accessible, a special node, Color Space Transform, CST for short. You put it into a chain, specify the input space, meaning what it was shot in, and the output, say Rec 709, and it brings the picture around. A bit more manual work, but more control. And there is a more advanced path here, color management at the level of the whole project. In the settings, you switch color science to DaVinci RGB Color Managed. This works either with RAW files or if you specify for each clip what it was shot in. And then the program brings all the footage around at once. I, for instance, run my whole project in ACES. On the input I specify my camera's data, and on the output I set P3, my monitor space. But color management has its own subtleties, and that's already a topic for a separate video. To get started, a camera LUT or CST is plenty. The main thing is to remember the principle: interpretation first, then grading. Now that the picture is in normal state, let's talk about the instruments. The scopes, these things here. Without them, you'll be grading blind. You can expand them with a separate button to see them better. The main ones: waveform, which shows the brightness of the frame bottom to top. The bottom is shadows and the top is highlights. Parade, the same thing but separately for red, green and blue channels. And vector scope, which shows colors and saturation, and it has a special skin tone indicator. If your subject's skin vector lies along it, the skin looks natural. I strongly recommend training yourself to look at the instruments, not just at the picture with your eyes. The eye tires and deceives itself, especially on an uncalibrated monitor, but the instruments don't lie. And since we are starting to work, we need to talk about how the grading itself is structured, about the note editor, this zone in the top right. It's the foundation of the page. Without it, the rest won't make sense. The idea is, instead of piling all your edits into a heap, you lay them out across nodes, where each node is a separate layer of correction. In the first node, you fix the overall balance. Added a second, darkened the background. A third, worked on the face. A new node is Alt-S. Any node can be temporarily disabled to instantly see what it does, the best way to check yourself. Nodes come as serial, where the picture goes through them one after another, like a conveyor. That's your main mode. There are parallel and layered nodes. The difference is that a parallel one combines several edits as equals, while a layer one stacks them from bottom to the top, like layers. At the start, work with serial, and just note that parallel and layer ones exist for complex grades. In the recent versions, the graph also learned to show layers as a list and hold a stack of up to 8 layers in one node. So keep in mind, everything we spin here, wheels, curves, selections, lives on nodes, and each tool you apply on its own node. Now the main correction tool, primary color wheels. To understand how they work, it is handy to take a black and white gradient, grayscale. It is in DaVinci itself in the effects. There are 4 wheels. Lift handles the dark areas, the shadows. Gamma, the midtones, gain, the highlights. Offset moves the whole picture at once. The dial under a wheel raises or lowers the brightness of the trench, and the wheel itself moves the color. And here is the main thing people don't get right away. Do not pull the highlights all the way to the ceiling, or the shadows all the way to the floor. The waveform is insane you to shove the signal to the edges. It shows the boundaries. Here's the top, here's the bottom, here's how far you have real information, and beyond these edges, it's gone. And how much to pull exactly depends on the shot and what you want. A night scene's highlights shouldn't hit the ceiling. A sunny days, the opposite. The instrument is there, so you don't fly past the boundaries blind and understand what's happening to the picture. Next to the primary wheels, there are HDR color wheels. A newer set of wheels added in version 17. It lets you work on narrower brightness zones very precisely. But don't let the name scare you, it's not only for HDR content. And here, while we are at the wheels, I'll close the promise from the settings about printer lights. It is an old cinema correction method, coming all the way from film printing. Instead of smoothly turning a wheel, you change red, green and blue in fixed steps with buttons, plus a step of red, minus a step of blue. The point is precision and repeatability. The step is always the same. You can match shots to each other completely predictably. It is turned on through the color menu, printer light, hotkeys, and adjusted from the numeric keypad. For a beginner, it is exotica, honestly. With wheels and curves, you'll do all the same things and more visibly. But since I promised to cover it, know that this tool exists, and professional colorists used to film use it. Next, custom curves. The most important, the plain diagonal line. Pull it up, it brightens. Make a slight S shape, you add contrast. Essentially, everything the wheels do can be done with curves. It is just sometimes handier one way, sometimes the other. There are also curves tied to hue. Hue versus hue, change one color into another. Hue versus saturation, mute to boost the saturation of just one color. Say, come down skin, that's to red. And luminance versus saturation is to control brightness. Nearby lives a relatively new tool, Color Warper, a kind of web grid you grab and pull colors with, intuitively changing hue and saturation. A newer still, Color Slice, which breaks the picture into color ranges and lets you manage them quickly. Now, how to work not on the whole picture but on the part of it. For color, this is important. The first tool qualifier, the eyedropper. You click a color you want in the frame and the program selects all similar pixels. That's how you select the sky and tinted bluer separately, or select skin, for example. The second power windows, essentially masks like in Photoshop or Lightroom. Geometric shapes, a circle, a rectangle, a freehand curve with which you limit an area. The classic is a vignette at the edges or brightening a face. And so the window writes along a moving object. There is the tracker. There are three kinds here, actually. You hit track and DaVinci analyzes the motion and drags the window along with the object through the whole clip. Get used to the order. Select, grade, track, check. And separately, Magic Mask, the thing that turns selection work upside down. Right away, a caveat. It runs on AI, and everything AI in DaVinci usually works in the studio version only, so on the free one, it may be unavailable. Magic Mask lets you select an object or a person with one stroke. You draw a stroke across a person and DaVinci cuts them out itself, separating them from the background, and then follows them through the whole clip. In the recent versions, it's already the second, far smarter version, and a rendering place Magic Mask option appeared in the three-dot menu. The mask is computed in advance and turns into a separate external matte node you can use as an alpha anywhere. And the system no longer recalculates it on the fly. For a beginner, it is just a lifesaver. You select the person, make the background cooler and darker, him warmer and brighter, and the shot instantly comes alive with depth. And once you've mastered all of this, a few words about grading not one clip, but a whole scene. Having achieved the color you want on the shot, you save it to the gallery as a still, and then in one move apply grade. You throw the same grade onto other clips, so everything is consistent. And when a scene has many clips, you combine them into a group and grade the whole group at once, tweaking each one on top. And try it here on Notes, Effects sleeve. Noise reduction in the studio version, one of the best denoisers I've seen, sharpening and the whole Resolve effects library, glow, vignettes, grain, all hung on a separate node and keyframeable. Color is the most extensive and deep page in the program, you can really live here. But if you've mastered the scopes, wheels, curves, selection through the qualifier, windows and Magic Mask, lay your edits out across nodes and most importantly, start with the right interpretation of your footage, you've already graded head and shoulders above most beginners. So let's move to audio. I'm gonna warn you right away, I hardly work in Fairlight. I have very little experience here. If on color I know a lot, and here I don't feel at home at all. And audio, to be honest, I process across several apps at once. I'm not an audio engineer, so I'm gonna cover the basics on the surface, and here and there might be small inaccuracies. But the base you need to know I'm gonna give you, because there is a simple truth. A viewer will forgive you a mediocre picture, but audio, never. Fairlight is the page for working with sound. Waveforms are displayed differently here than on edit. For a single clip, you see two waveform tracks for the left and right channels, whereas on edit it all goes as a single stream. You can widen the boundary between the windows to see the waveform. On the left, timeline selection, on the right, a mixer with vertical faders, like on a real audio console. The tools are mostly familiar: cursor selection, section selection, Alt-X to deselect everything, and the relatively new focus mode, a combination of selecting and moving. The top selects, the bottom moves a piece. The razor, snapping, link selection, markers. There is transient detection. It finds sharp loud spots in the audio, where the tongue clicks or a pause. Handy if you're recording voiceover or an audiobook and want to clean out the spikes. Of the things you won't find anywhere else: sound library. There is the built-in Fairlight library and an internet search, and through the three dots you can connect your own local sound database. And there is the ADR panel, the re-recording. When the dialogue recorded badly, the actor revoices himself, hitting his own lips, like in Hollywood. In setup mode you specify the microphone, the recording track, the reference track, the number of takes, the pre-roll countdown, the visual streamer bar, and in the list you write what exactly to say. Then you hit record. A separate topic: automation. These toggle automation icons. What is it? You play a video and write the volume faders with your own hands, and DaVinci records all your movement and then repeats them itself. You choose write mode if you're writing from a scratch, and trim to tweak. You choose a parameter, for example fader. You hit automation arm, spacebar, and write the line. The program builds keyframes along it. And then that drawn curve can be edited with the pencil tool. Drag left to right and the whole automation lines up along your line. That's how complex scenes, where the volume is always changing, get mixed at a semi-professional level. On the right, the mixer, and at the top of each track a set of processing, in order top to bottom. First comes input, the sound source. Right below it, track effects, and this is the tastiest block. Ready-made AI tools for voice. Here's voice isolation. This is practically mandatory for anyone recording sound outside a studio. You turn it on and DaVinci cleans out background noise, hum, room echo, leaving a clean voice. And in the recent versions, this algorithm got noticeably better. Next to a dialogue leveler, which evens out the jumps in dialogue loudness. Dialogue separator, music remixer, and docker for auto-ducking music under speech. Below the order block, that's dynamics and EQ, and the word order isn't there by accident. You can swap them. You set the processing order yourself. In dynamics, leave the compressor, gate, expander, limiter. They even out and process the dynamics. And the equalizer cuts extra frequencies, for example low hum. I'm gonna be honest, with compressors and the equalizers, I'm not the expert to teach you the fine points. For that, you should watch dedicated audio lessons. Next, effects. That's Fairlight effects, a set of effects like reverbs and denoises. But note, if you hang a lot of them, playback starts to stutter. And at the very bottom, the track goes off to a bus, through bus send and pen. And the track can be normalized to a required loudness standard with a right click. And one more nice touch in the new DaVinci. If you've ended up with a lot of tracks and the timeline has turned into a mess, you can collapse them into a folder so they don't take up space. Right-click a track, add track to a new folder, and it goes into a collapsible folder track. You can add the others there too. The tracks themselves don't go anywhere and aren't merged. They're just visually hidden into one. And the timeline becomes readable again. A small thing, but on a complex project, it really unclutters the picture. And one more new thing. The clip equalizer is now 6-band on all pages. In short, the beginner recipe for audio is simple. Set sensible levels by the meters so nothing overloads. Run the voice through voice isolation. Tweak with the equalizer a little if needed. Bring the music down below the voice. and your audio will be already above the YouTube average. Anyone who was waiting for a full Fairlight tutorial, that's probably not me. One page left. The last page is deliver, the output. When the project is ready, it has to be given to the world, and this is exactly what handles that. The first thing that matters, before exporting, set the resolution you need. While we were editing, we had 1080. If you switch to deliver at that resolution, it gets carried over here. And when you change it to 4K and add the project to the render queue, DaVinci will warn you that the project resolution doesn't match to the one you want to render in. So we gotta go back to the gear in the project settings. In master we changed the resolution to what we want, say 4K. Save, and on deliver it updates. The page is laid out logically. Top left, render settings. Center, the viewer. Bottom, the timeline and the render queue. Up top there is a tape choice, output to film, which 99% of people don't need. We're covering digital output here. Right away go into the three dots and in the during render update section set off. If you don't, DaVinci will spin the video in the window during rendering, and that's extra load, especially on a weak machine and in 4K, where the GPU memory is already at its limit. Turn it off, one still picture freezes and the render goes faster. Next we choose what we are rendering, either the whole timeline or a piece. Then you set in and out points. To see the whole timeline at once, you hit Shift-Z. And if DaVinci glitches and refuses to render a whole timeline, you'll need to use in and out points again. Now the output settings themselves. Up top, presets for popular platforms. There is a ready-made YouTube preset and others. Note the free version outputs at most in 4K UHD, meaning 3840 by 2160 and up to 60 frames per second. The studio version lifts that ceiling, DCI 4K, 8K and higher, all the way to 32K and 120 FPS. I don't use presets myself, I'm used to setting things manually, so let's go through the manual settings. Custom. First, file, the file name, and definitely location, the folder it will land in. You hit browse and choose. Next, an important point, render single clip or individual clips. Single is a whole video, and individual is needed when the client asks you to hand over each clip as a separate file, for example graded clips to swap into the timeline. Next we choose video, audio or file, in most cases video. Format and codec. As a container I recommend QuickTime, and of the codecs for posting online, H.264 and H.265. They compress files to a reasonable size at good quality. But if you need to hand over the project losslessly for further work, you take DNxHR or ProRes. But bear in mind, the files will be gigantic. And remember, if you render a heavy codec to upload to YouTube, there is no point. YouTube will recompress everything anyway, and no one will see the difference. You'll just fill up your drive. The encoder can be left on auto. Leave the resolution and frame rate as in the project. Don't try to change the frame rate on output, there will be problems. Next, quality. There is automatic, or you can set the bitrate manually. There is a known rule. Set the bitrate roughly double the frame rate, then the quality is decent. And an important point people get burned on. Go into the advanced settings and make sure that using optimized media and proxies for render isn't turned on. If it is, you'll output the video in the same lightweight, bad quality. It's off by default, but you're gonna need to check. If you made subtitles, they need to either be burnt into the picture so they are always visible, or handed over as a separate file. By default they don't render until you turn that on. And be sure to check that audio checkbox is on, because sometimes a person outputs a silent video. Then you add the project to the render queue. That's a list of jobs. And by the way, you can pile jobs from different projects into the queue. If after adding to the queue you want to change something, there is a little pencil. You hit it, adjust the parameters, no need to delete, and set it up again. Hit Render All. The progress bar goes. On completion it says completed. You grab the finished file from your folder, and the video is ready to publish. And separately, I'm gonna mention the loudest new feature of version 21, the photo page, working with photographs. Essentially, Blackmagic took their color tools and handed them to photographers. DaVinci can now process photos right here, and it's in effect a full-blown alternative to Lightroom inside the same program. Our course is about video, so I'll skim the surface. But you should know about this page, because for those who both shoot video and take photos, the whole workflow is now in one window. What it can do? First, it's a full photo library organizer, importing shots, albums, star ratings, favorites, tags, collections, a lightbox mode to survey a whole album with the grade applied. RAW from a pile of cameras is supported. You can import Lightroom catalogs, and on Mac, pull in Apple Photos. There is tethered shooting. The camera connects to the computer and the shots drop straight into an album. And the main thing, processing goes through the very same node-based color we covered on Color page. The same curves, qualifiers, power windows, LUTs, resolve effects, and even Magic Mask and the new AI Ultra Sharpen for boosting sharpness and upscaling. Meaning everything you learn great in video works on photos one-to-one. The tool is young, in places still a bit raw compared to Lightroom, which was polished for 20 years, but the direction is excellent. So if besides video you also take photos, definitely drop by the photo page and try it yourself. Well then, we've gone through DaVinci Resolve from start to finish. We covered why DaVinci specifically, set up the program, went through the media page, dropped by the quick cut page, thoroughly covered edit, touched notes on Fusion, properly graded on color, mixed audio on Fairlight, looked at the new photo page, and output the finished file on Deliver. Along the way, we also covered everything new that appeared up through version 21. And the most important thing at the end, no course, this one included, will make you an editor by itself. Practice will. Don't try to memorize everything, that's impossible and unnecessary. The best advice, right now take any footage of your own and do a project from start to finish. Edit it, add effects, try grading. That's when you'll have a pile of questions, I promise, and it's exactly by answering them that you'll truly learn. And the buttons that now look like gibberish will become second nature after a few projects. That's all, thank you for being here with me, thank you for watching. The course turned out long, and if you made it to the end, you're a real champ. Learn, try, and create. See you. Goodbye.